This morning I'm going to study a new poem by two Korean poets and W.B.H. I'm going to compare them, okay? Okay, first, this is the first part is the introduction to those poets, Yeats, Kim Chun-soo and Kim Jong-il, and I'm going to go to the essay, page 245. The title of the essay is Korean Poetry through W.B.H., Kim Chun-soo and Kim Jong-il. Okay. In literature, it is not easy to identify the influence of a writer on a later person or his or her contemporary. But if we pay close attention to the work itself, it is not that important to get a glimpse of influences in it. In a painting by a later artist, however, it is not as difficult to meet with parts of the artist that must have gone through the mind of artists who created. So, if a writer or an artist has a long and rich tradition before him, it is more probable to have influences in his work. And in a sense, those who do not know all the influence working in it may be happier to read or see a work. Similarly, The Wasteland, the greatest and most famous work by T.S. Eliot, may come to a first-time reader as a surprise if he does not know all the sources at the end of the poem and the notes made by scholars. A Chagall, a painter, would similarly look like a new painting if we did not hear him say he had owed Cézanne. Chagall was influenced by Cézanne. Do you know that? Right. But though we would be less surprised, their work still looks brilliant and fresh to us. My aim of this paper is not to trace all the footsteps of a former poet in later works. I want to feel and think about what could have passed in the mind of the later poets. I offer parallel tendencies as influences and how they have been turned into poetry. My subject is the two authors under Yeats, under the influence of Yeats, Kim Chun-soo and Kim Jong-il of Korea. Comparing two poets from East and West, we have to solve problems. To name a few, the poetic diction, the poetic motif, the social melee. To research all these takes much time and effort, often with little fruition. To me, a simple approach is as much effective is to read and feel and think with the authors. Intentional fallacy, it is not. My reading here is one way from Yeats to Kim Chun-soo and Kim Jong-il. To those in doubt as to the comparative study of this kind, I offer to exemplify the visual art of Picasso and Matisse. As it resorts to the concrete, unlike literary work, thus, it is easier to see what is visible than what is invisible and to be imagined, as in literary works. And I must add that I have long searched the relationship between art and literature, as well as poet and poet. For such works as poet-painters, Yeats, Picasso, and Kim Jong-il, my article, the Yeats Journal of Korea, volume 28. Toward the New Poetic Form and Yeats and Pound, volume 22, and Yeats and Coleridge, Kubla Khan, volume 17. Milton Yeats, Female Image in Poetry, volume 12. All of these are my articles. In a comparative study of visual art, which is easier compared with Yeats's work, we should still conduct a highly sophisticated research and observation, because in comparing Picasso and Matisse, for instance, it is not easy to discern who did what. Look at Picasso, woman with yellow hair, painted in December, on December 27, 1931, compared with Matisse's Dream, done between January and October, January to October 4th, 1940. See the reproductions in Matisse and Picasso. pages 138 to 9. The general public could hardly tell the differences in them, even to experts and painters. The composition, the pose, and the expression on the face of the woman dreaming, leaning on a sofa is so much alike that they would not tell them apart without the signature on the lower left corner of each painting. But take your time and look. Then you will see the unmistakable brushstrokes and textures with different speeds and force characterizing each artist. Picasso's brushstrokes are steady and smooth, making clean and crisp lines, sometimes straight and sometimes curved, while Matisse's brushstrokes are quick and rhythmical, creating the outer particulars of each part of things depicted to externalize the inner state of what's on a mind, the content of a dream. The characteristic expressions in each work reveal the different personality in the two genius painters. Picasso's woman is more realistic, resembling the profile of the particular Marie-Thérèse. As Picasso's biographer, Pierre Dax writes in his chapter, Hymn to Marie-Thérèse. In his Picasso, Life and Art, and the woman must be Marie-Thérèse. Matisse, on the other hand, used to use models to do nudes and portraits. Looking into the painting, we can see that the lines depicting facial expression and hands are done not from memory, but taken directly from live models, though they are simplified and stylized. His figures, in general, tend toward the universal femininity, not toward the particular woman, as in Picasso. They are the differences, right? Now, let's look at Kim Chun-soo in relation to Yeats. First, I want to begin with Professor Kim Jong-il's essay, The Poet That Never Stops, exploring an introduction to Kim Chun-soo. Professor Kim ends his essay by quoting the following from Eliot's concluding stanza of the Little Gidding of the four-section masterpiece, four quartets, consisting of Bunt Norton, East Quaker, The Dry Salvages, and Little Gidding. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. Good conclusion, right? I find the quotation both interesting and enlightening. Kim Jong-il must have thought that Kim Chun-soo is as important Korean poetry as T.S. Eliot in English poetry, though not without reservation. In the article, Kim also says that he has translated Kim Chun-soo's poems for years, and that now he has enough translations for a book publication in the United States in 1997 or 1998. The quotation from four quartets sums up the very character of Kim Chun-soo, the poet and the man. The essay neither discusses poetry nor theorizes on it poetry. It just looks back on the long personal interaction between Kim Chun-soo and the author, Kim Jong-il, hinting that Kim Chun-soo is a unique personality who could but write unique and pure poetry, though he was once forced out of the blue to be in politics. Professor Kim's concluding paragraphs speak strongly for him. To sum up, 1. Kim Chun-soo is one of the most professional artistic poets of Korea that goes his own way alone. Though Kim Jong-il has some doubt about the poet's poetry, it is the uniqueness in the poetry that the author's personal affection for him that have led him to translate poetry into English. 2. Though what he calls the purity of escapism has isolated him from the outside world, the fact that he is still in strong mental and physical shape is that he takes what Valery calls intellectual exercise. 3. His poetry in the contemporary Korean poetry is a spectacular scene. All through the worldly rise and fall in life, he survives to create poetry of his own, never giving up his poetic temperament, his own world, on his way to it. He goes back to what he was, as Eliot says conclusively in his poem, Little Gidding. while reading the poetry of Kim Chun-soo, we came across the name of Rilke in it. He must have under the influence of Rilke, a German poet. It is not easy to compare Rilke and him in terms of poetic diction, as Kim, professor of Korean poetry himself, seems to know there is a wide gap between the language. He says he liked Rilke, but that he learned from Rilke, not in poetic diction, but poetic pose taken by Rilke. But Kim Chun-soo has not mentioned Yeats in any of his poems. However, as I've read both poets from start to finish, there is an essential similarity between Kim Chun-soo and Yeats. The poetic self, the essence of the lyrical romantic poetry. Kim Hyun, a superb critic full of insights into Kim Chun-soo's work, also claims in his essay, Kim Chun-soo and His Poetic Transformation, that the poetry of Kim Chun-soo is the poetics of lingering mind. I think that basically, Yeats' poetry is mostly about the poetic mind in progress of exploring something. And the poems are such efforts to reach a unity of being, to borrow Yeats' term. The difference between Yeats and Kim and how each poet writes poetry, Yeats' is the poem as a full manifestation of such poetic process, whereas Kim's is the poem as a sudden enlightenment with a minimum of a shorthand recording of thought process. Yeats is a poet who feels with thinking, while Kim Chun-soo is a poet who thinks with feeling. The same thing, right? Another thing that characterizes both is both Yeats and Kim Chun-soo are highly sensitive to sound, the silence of sound, the light, movement. I want to read one of Kim's poems closely, which will manifest these characteristics. As this is an effort of mine to read Kim with Yeats in mind, I will give and analyze one of Yeats' poems first, and then Kim's. First, The Lake Isle of Innisfree. We've gone through this poem already. I will arise and go now and go to Innisfree, and a small cabin built there of clay and wattles made. 9 bean rows will I have there, a hive for the honeybee. Live alone in the bee-loud glade. And I shall have some peace there, for peace comes dropping slow, dropping from the vales of morning to where the cricket sings. There, midnight's all a glimmer, on a purple glow, evening full of linnet's wings. I will rise and go now, for always night and day I hear lake water lapping with low sounds by the shore. While I stand on the roadway, on the pavement's gray, I hear it beep housecool. This poem, written in 1890, was first printed in the National Observer on December 13, 1890. About the poem, Yeats' letter of 30th November 1922 says that he was very homesick in London. In his autobiography, Yeats mentions how he came to compose this poem and also in what diction. This is what Yeats said. When walking through the Fleet Street, London, very homesick, I heard a little tinkle of water and saw a fountain in a shop window, which balanced a little bowl upon its jet, and began to remember lake water. From the sudden remembrance came my poem, Innisfree, my first lyric with anything in its rhythm of my own music. This is one of his early poems. The italic is my emphasis. I had begun to loosen rhythm as an escape for rhetoric. I must, for my special purpose, use nothing but the common syntax. A couple of years later, I wouldn't have written that first line with its conventional archaism, a rise and go, nor the inversion, the last stanza. In addition to the common and archaic syntax, Richard Ellman, Yeats scholar, observe in this poem 2 distinct styles. One is that of concrete details, as in the first stanza, and the other is that of fancy metaphors. This is the early poem that Yeats thinks is the first poem in his own music. To a poet, the first poem is a microcosm of the world of his own poetry to come. Yeats' long poem, The Wanderings You've Seen, published in 1888, is that poem. In a short poem, The Lake Isle Innisfree is that poem too. What I mean is, Yeats' whole poetic development is indicated by this short relic from fancy metaphors to the stark style of reality as seen in the Circus Animals Desertion, which was published in the Atlantic Monthly in January 1939, and in the London Mercury, January 1939. Yeats died in 1939. As mentioned above, Yeats's poetry is realization of the poetics of self, and this poem is an example. The poem develops as his remembrance takes the speaker from where he stands in London to where he stood on the Isle of Innisfree in Sligo years ago. The poem has the speaker I. I is the central in many of his poems to come. I represents Yeats, the person in some poems, and the Yeats and mask in most poems. In both kinds of his poetry, it is the key to the crux of a poem. If you can understand, define the I in that poem, that means that you have a firm grasp of it. The Lake Isle of Innisfree consists of 3 stanzas. It begins with I and ends with I. But the middle stanza begins with and I shall, and after that, I does not show up. The whole stanza is engaged in process of imagining and remembering. An eagle-eyed almond says it. The first stanza is filled with details of reality that the speaker has known. A small cabin made of wattles, the bean rose, the honey bees, and the beloved glade. He has a wish to be a bee raiser on the isle. The speaker in the second stanza is never nearer to an imagined world. He is in the midst of all that could happen in the supreme state of an ideal world. Peace comes dropping from the veils of the morning to where the cricket sings. The midnight's all agleam on a purple glow, an evening full of linnet's wings. All these fantastic movements of light and sound and visual images the speaker shall have, except for the best of Shelley and Keats. None of English romantic poets could stand this long with light, sound, visual. Yeats is one of the most romantic of romantic poets here in this poem. The speaker in the third and final stanza awakens reality. The speaker feels pain in heart, realizing he is on the great pavement of London, and this realization separates him from most romantics except for Shelley. Okay, I'll stop here. Okay, thank you.